boundaries with your clients. So for those who don't know me, I'm Kim and I help female entrepreneurs to overcome perfectionism and worthiness issues in 21 days so they can scale their biz with a whole lot more ease. So boundaries is such a big topic because I think straight away a lot of us, when we get into business, we're like, okay, I'm gonna be there for my clients. I want to over deliver. I really want to show them that I care. I want to do a good job. And those are all amazing things. But at some point along the way, we kind of get lost trying to prove ourselves and how good we are at customer service and all the things. And it kind of gets us into a place that doesn't really serve us, because then we end up working all hours of the day. We're answering emails at ridiculous times. And then we kind of end up burnt out and resentful. And noticing when a boundary is crossed, the best way to notice is are you feeling resentful somewhere? Is there something that you're resentful of? And a really great example of this is when I was working as a photographer. You would get clients a lot of the time where they would be sending you emails. I had one client who he would call me at 6 in the morning, and at that point in time I didn't really have the language or the understanding of how to properly communicate that this wasn't how I wanted to be communicated with. And so I would do things like avoid it, or I would try and not deal with the situation, or I would just let it happen. And it kind of created for not a great relationship, because they were kind of overstepping the boundary, but then I also wasn't communicating what the boundaries were, and I hadn't laid that out at the beginning. So the boundaries is a two-person dance. It's one of you or both of you need to be communicating where the boundary is, and then it's up to the other person how they're going to meet that. And then if the other person is continually not meeting you at your boundary, you kind of need to evaluate whether this relationship is one you want to kind of keep going. But when you get to that point, it's almost like it's too late. You've allowed it to go too far past the point where it can be kind of hard to pull it back. Not saying that you can't, but it's a lot harder to enforce a boundary if it's never been spoken about. So this is especially important in business relationships. And knowing what I know now, I 100% would have written in the contract, here's my business hours, this is the time zone I'm in, because that was part of the problem. He was calling me at 6 a.m., but it was his 9 a.m., but for me it was 6 a.m. And so I hadn't really communicated that properly. So that was partially on me. But it also having strong boundaries and laying out what the terms of you guys working together is super powerful, because it's going to weed out clients that you don't want to work with. And I think a lot of us, when we start a business, we have this experience where we're we just want to get clients. We'll take pretty much anyone, we'll work at any price. And that's not really a great way to be running your business, because it's not respecting yourself, and people will always respect you as much as you're respecting yourself. So those clients always come in and you can sort of tell straight away what they're going to be like. And let me tell you from experience, if you think that they're going to be difficult to work with at the beginning, then they will be. It's never been a situation where you're oh, I thought they were going to be difficult to work with and they were actually way easier. And then by then it's too late and you're feeling resentful and you don't really want to do the job anyways, and it's not really worth it. So learning to follow that intuition about those clients and who they're going to be is really powerful as well. But basically, when it comes to setting good boundaries with your clients, it's knowing that boundaries are not meant to keep people out. They're meant to show people where the fence is. Basically, there's this saying that good boundaries make for good neighbors, because then it's you understand this is mine, this is yours, this is how we should respect that. And as long as we don't cross it, we can live next to each other in peace and harmony, and everything is great. So it's not designed to keep people out. It's just to make them aware of how you want to be spoken to, how you want to be worked with. And especially when it comes to working with clients in your business, this is so important, because we might think oh my God, why is this person sending me so many DMs about this course that I've created? Don't they know it's a done for you course? They should just be self-managing. I don't have time to deal with all of this, and especially not in the DMs. And it's okay, you could have possibly mitigated that situation by having a video at the beginning of the course being hey, I'm super excited you're here. This is self-paced. If you do have any issues with the course, please send an email to whatever your email is, and me or my team will get back to you within 48 hours. And then that kind of clearly lays out here's how you need to communicate to me about this. And if you could even throw in there like, hey, if you're gonna send me DMs about this, I actually get a lot of DMs and I don't want yours to get lost in the shuffle, because those I kind of get to as I get to them, and your like communicating with you is important to me and I don't want you to get lost in that shuffle. So please don't send me DMs about the course, or something along those lines. And so that way you've laid out from the beginning, like, here's how to communicate with me, here's how you can best be served. It's really in your best interest to not be sending me like 50 DMs, because that way you're going to get the attention that you need within this specific time frame in the right venue, which is email. But people don't know that if you haven't told them that. So that's why it's really important to over communicate, especially at the beginning of working with someone. And so this could look like having a really strong contract, or having like, well, you should always have a strong contract, but even if you say it's like something, a digital course where like you might not have a contract for it, some kind of an agreement, or like having some kind of a disclaimer like, hey, like, you know that this is how it's going to work, or having like a video at the beginning of the course being like, here's how to contact me, I'm available between these hours, this time zone, this is how long it's going to take for me to get back to you, it might be me or my team. So that way you're really setting that expectation. And do people read this or listen to it? No, not, of course not all the time. But later, if they're not listening to if they're kind of going outside of what you've told them, you can be like, hey, refer back to this and this will explain it to you. And so then that way it's not on you and it doesn't make you look bad, because that way it was more, I'm not saying it's their fault, but it's like, it's on them because they didn't watch that video and learn how to communicate with you properly so that they had the best experience. So that's why it's really important to almost like over communicate to people at the beginning, because people are busy, there's a lot going on, they're paying a lot like attention to a lot of different things. So you kind of want to like really set out those terms. And here's just like a couple of things that are really good to set out at the beginning of working with someone. Here's how to communicate with me, here's how long to expect to reply, like, is it 24 hours, is it 48 hours? Like, communicate that, because you don't want people being like, oh, I emailed you and an hour later you haven't replied. Like, well, they can't say that if you told them it will take 48 hours for me to get back to you, and it might be my team or it might be me. And then also setting out like, what's the scope of the project, how much everything is going to cost, here's exactly what you're getting out of it, like here's the deliverables, here's the timeline. What else I've got in my notes? Office hours, what time zone those office hours are in. Put it all in a contract or an agreement, and make sure everyone is super clear about this at the beginning of working with each other. It's not going to say that we're not going to have problems down the line because someone forgot, or they're like testing that boundary, or some people, they just don't listen or they don't read things. But you've done your part. You've like put it out there and been like, hey, here's what we're going to do, here's how we're going to do it, here's how I want to be contacted, and here's when I want to be contacted. And like, doing that is going to go a long way, because you've set the boundary, you've told them what to expect, you've told them like how to get in contact with you, you've told them basically the best way to work with you, and that's advantageous for them. And I know it feels scary at first sometimes, like putting that out there and being like, hey, like, this is how we need to do things. It feels scary, and that's totally normal, because if you've never done something before, it's going to feel weird the first time you do it, but that's okay. It doesn't mean it's the wrong thing to do. Step number 2 is knowing that you're worthy of having these boundaries. A lot of the time I see people when they start their business, they're like, I just want to over deliver. I want to do like a really good job. I really want to be there for my clients. And it's like, okay, but at what expense to you? Like, if you are on your email or on your phone with your clients at like 8 p.m. on a Friday night, like, it's kind of, you're not showing them that you value your time, and you're not showing them that you value like taking care of yourself, because like, you can't pour from an empty cup. So if you are like trying to go above and beyond, but at the expense of your own well-being and like having boundaries around work, just because you have a business doesn't mean you need to be working 24/7. It doesn't mean that the business is open 24/7 to speak with clients, because if you're doing that, then you're not going to be well rested. And if you're not well rested, how can you take care of your clients better? So this is when that worthiness piece comes in, knowing that you're worthy of having those boundaries, know that you're worthy of standing up for yourself, know that you're worthy of like taking taking time away from your business to rest and recharge, because that way when you come back into it, you're going to be better at working with people ultimately. And there's always going to be people who push back against this, and it doesn't mean that you're wrong. You need to know that you're worth having the boundaries that you set out for yourself. So this is a huge part of the puzzle. It's like working on your self-worth and just doing it when it feels uncomfortable, communicating those boundaries, expressing it to people, and enforcing it when people might push back against it, but that's on you to kind of be like, no, this is where the fence is. Like, we're not doing it that way, because this is my business and it's my business, so I get to create the rules. Sometimes when we get into business, it's like we don't have like a boss or someone above us to refer back to as to like why the policy is the policy. But that's why you need to feel worthy and deserving of having that, because no one's going to stand up for it if you don't stand up for it. And then the third thing is staying neutral. Like, there's going to be times where you are going to need to communicate your boundaries, and you're just going to have to like remind people over and over again, because sometimes some people just don't get it. Like, you tell them, okay, I'm available between business hours of like 9 to 5, and they're calling you at 6 p.m. And then if you don't answer the next time next time you talk to them, you can be like, hey, like, just like a gentle reminder, the business hours are 9 to 5. After that, like, I'm not available. And people need to understand that. And it's like, you don't need to be apologetic. You don't need to be reactionary. You don't need to get offended that someone has like violated your boundary. Like, I know straight away you can go into being like, oh my god, they don't respect me, but maybe that's not the case. Maybe they just forgot. So when you stay neutral, you're able to just communicate with them and be like, hey, like, this is how you can contact me, just to like a reminder. And then if they continue to do it, well, that's a different conversation, but you can still remain neutral through it. And as long as you don't get reactionary or make it personal or make it about you, then it's just going to build for better communication between people, because as humans, we have this tendency to make everything about us, and we always make it personal when it doesn't have to be. Maybe it's not personal. Maybe they're just having a bad day. Maybe they forgot. So when you can come into it with like from a neutral place of not being triggered or reactionary about it, you're probably going to get a better reaction from them as well. So just to kind of sum it up, the best way to handle having boundaries with your clients is like really over communicating at the beginning of working together, like really setting out what those boundaries are. And then also staying neutral when you end up in conflict with people, or not even conflict, but if you have to communicate when someone has crossed a line, just being neutral about it and being like, hey, like, maybe you didn't intend to do this, but like, this is actually how you can get in contact with me. This is how we do XYZ, just to let you know, or just as a reminder. And then also to know that you're worthy and deserving of having those boundaries and getting to rest and not having to be working in your business 24/7. So I hope this was helpful for you. If you're struggling with boundaries or having like worthiness issues, hop on a strategy call with me. It's completely free, and we can chat about how I can help you overcome this in just 21 days. So I hope you have an incredible day, and I will talk to you soon.